proposal to enact a universal penalty for parents found guilty of abandoning their children. Amendment. The title of the proposal states, propose to enact a universal penalty for parents found guilty of abandoning their children. The amendment is to change the word universal to minimum.
All right. The author is now recognized for a 2-minute opening statement.
Jordan Barr, representing the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Thank you, Sir Chair. In what is arguably one of the most overlooked issues in today's society, child abandonment presents a very real danger to America's youth. And the lack of action in regards to this issue is not only astonishing, but troublesome. Child abandonment should hereby be defined as any voluntary action by a guardian, whereby they relieve themselves of basic parental responsibilities by a means not constituting legal adoption, and thus cause reasonable concerns about their child's safety and other physiological needs. The reality is that child abandonment laws do not exist everywhere, and in many, abandoning a child is equated with the misdemeanor of speeding. If we wish to intervene in this growing epidemic, setting a minimum standard for convicting those guilty of abandoning a child must be in place. Our federal government cannot stay silent on an issue when the current system allows guardians non-prosecutable routes to abandoning a child. Currently, negligent parents could travel to the state of Maryland and abandon the child while facing no legal consequences because Maryland has no laws addressing child abandonment. Should that child be found, it's estimated by Child Protective Services that the cost for care for the abandoned child averages $2,500 more per day due to the legal procedures hospitals must follow. Child abandonment is not only a burden to the child, but the state as well. My proposal merely sets forth the minimum requirements for a state to follow while giving them the freedom to set their own specific laws. States will be required to recognize the most basic form of child abandonment with the least severe felony. As the severity of the abandonment increases, so does the severity of the felony. The majority ruled in Prince v. Massachusetts that the federal government can intervene in the lives of children when deemed necessary, and the number of children placed in danger through abandonment constitutes necessary intervention, and therefore it is our moral obligation to address this issue. I yield the remaining of my time to my submission speech.
Thank you, author. You have yielded 10 seconds. The floor is now open for 2 minutes of non-debatable technical questions. Are there such questions? Maryland, Michigan, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Texas, Pennsylvania, New York, Virginia, South Dakota.
They were mentioned in the delegation. What would be the differences in minimum sentencing for class 2, 3, 4 felonies, or are they?
Based on the severity of the abandonment, a Class A felony is punishable up to $10,000 in fines and 3.5 years in prison. As it goes up, so does the fine, and so does the years in prison.
Riley Ford, Commonwealth, Virginia. Does this affect, in many states, churches are safe havens for the abandonment of children? Would this affect the churches?
It is not, because those are legal options to relieving parental responsibility.
For locations in Wisconsin, how many children did this apply, say, in like the last year or the last couple of years?
It's estimated that over 7,000 children are abandoned every year.
Christina Martin, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. How will parents be found and prosecuted for child abandonment?
In the same way that if a child is found, they will be recognized and they can go through the legal procedures to figure out who their guardian is.
That's the Republic of Texas. What are some common punishments associated with a Class 2 felony if convicted?
A Class 2 felony, it can be punishable up to $10,000 in fines and 6 years in prison.
Spear, Oklahoma. In line 11 of your proposal, you define child abandonment as forcing a child to live without basic needs provided by a parent. So if a parent fails to pay child support and it results in their lack of basic needs, will this parent then be convicted of a felony?
If that child is under that parent's legal custody, then yes.
Thank you.
New York. Can you describe the different levels of child abandonment?
Yes, if basic child abandonment, say for instance the way it's kicked out, that's the most basic. If it's done recklessly and puts the child in immediate harm, that ups the punishment. If it involves them in criminal activity like drug trafficking or prostitution, that is criminal negligence.
So it's Canonica, South Carolina. Just for purely clarification purposes, what defines voluntary?
If they basically tell themselves that they do not want this child anymore, so they are going
Thank
to...
you. Time has now elapsed for non-debatable technical questions. The chair would like to recognize a con speaker. Is there such a speaker on the floor? Robinson, please speak.
Hey,
Wisconsin DC delegations. I'm not a big fan of parents losing their child. However, it's wrong. But if you don't know how to take care of that child, then you have to provide better means for it. If you're going to charge a person for abandonment, you might as well have a punishment for adoption and abortion. Because you're not giving the child life and you're giving the child away. I'm not constituting how they gave the child away, but if they can't provide for it, then that's a problem. That's my constitution.
Thank you, Delegate. The chair would now like to recognize a pro speaker. Is there such a speaker on the floor? Delegate from Wisconsin.
Delegate Kokinos of the Wisconsin delegation, thank you, sir. Chair, I am very much in favor of this bill because, frankly, I live in the United States of America, not in a Charles Dickens novel. Leaving children to fend for themselves in a world as mean as ours is almost unspeakable. And the fact that it happens thousands of times in a year is absolutely disgusting. This is not something to be taken lightly at all. And if you cannot provide for a child, you at very least need to not leave it on the side of a road. Because there's not being able to provide and raise a child, and then there's doing literally nothing for it. Putting in an effort, trying to designate the child to a different family is absolutely acceptable. It's been done for years and decades and for generations to come. And it's the way to handle a situation, not just walking away from a problem that you spent 9 months creating. You do not spend all of that time, all of that effort, bringing a child into the world just to decide one day you're done. With that, I yield my time to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. The chair would now like to recognize a con speaker, and amendments are in order and will be so for the next 5 minutes. Wisconsin.
William Brown, Wisconsin delegation. Thank you, Chair. I reserve my right to yield all remaining time to Delegate Skokas from Florida. I have a couple issues with this proposal. First, second-degree murder is not a federal crime. Second-degree murder is a very serious offense, arguably more serious than child abandonment, and it is a state crime. This is considering child abandonment to be a higher issue, and it is, frankly, we're looking at two things, and we're not comparing them to the same level. We have to be realistic and compare one crime to an equal punishment. Secondly, if we take a child who's been abandoned, lots of children have issues with their parents and fights, and there's ways that can happen, and this is mostly applying to the lower levels of this, but parents do make mistakes. And parents make bad decisions, and even if they make this bad decision, if you put this parent in prison for 6 years, that parent can no longer raise their child. And a child being forced into a foster home is a lot of times worse than having to reconnect with their parent, even after a fight or a bad decision, and for that reason I cannot support this proposal. Thank you. I yield the remainder of my time to Skokas from Florida.
Thank you, Sir Chair. My name is Courtney Skokas, and I am from Florida. To quote this proposal, it says that child abandonment is a lack of appropriate supervision, face inadequate provision of nutrition and meals, face inadequate clothing, housing, or shelter, or face physical and sexual manipulation. I feel that this already exists under the offense neglect, which is prosecuted by law. Therefore, I find this redundant, as this offense already exists. Thank you. I yield my time to the chair.
Thank you, Delegate. Chair would now like to recognize a final pro speaker. Is there such a speaker on the floor? Jordan from Texas. There is something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Jordan from the dry heat state of Arizona. I reserve the right to yield the remainder of my time to Pascal from the District of Columbia.
That is your right.
One of the mandates of a government, especially a representative government, is to defend the minority, to provide protection for those who do not have protection, and especially to those who are most defenseless. It is hard to come up with a demographic that is more incapable of defending itself than young children, minors who are left on the side of the road thousands of times annually, as beautifully explained by the author, than those kids. Those kids are an unprotected class, and especially considering that states such as Maryland, as the author also points out, are doing absolutely nothing about it, it is more of a burden and more of a responsibility for the federal government to take aim and take action in this instance. The states are doing absolutely nothing about it, which is why it is the federal government's responsibility. Second-degree murder, states have penalties for that. Maryland doesn't have a penalty for child abandonment. It's time for the USFG to get involved. I yield the remainder of my time to Pascal from DC.
Thank you, sir. Chair Quinn Pascal from the District of Columbia. A person is a person that, no matter how small. These are the immortal words. Important here's a who. And in saying this, I believe that every person, especially these small people, children, these unalienable rights of life, love, liberty, shelter, water, and especially parents. And for them to be abandoned, I believe that this.
Thank you, Delegate. The time has now elapsed. The chair would like to recognize a final CONA speaker. Is there such a speaker on the floor?
County, Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I yield the remainder of my time to McCoy from Missouri.
That is your right.
I'd like to ask the author a non-debatable technical question.
Yes.
What other states have laws against child abandonment? Don't have laws.
Okay, the current states that do not have laws or jurisdictions are Maryland, Wyoming, Maine, Kansas, and Hawaii.
Thank you.
Eddie McCoy from Missouri delegation. Although I am very against child abusement and all of that kind of stuff, sometimes it's not that the parent